Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Muhammad Bilal, working as a lecturer at University of Education, and I'm teaching you the sociolinguistics. So, before talking about dialectal varieties of language, I would like to talk about the dialect. So, what is dialect? Dialect basically a language variety spoken by a speech community that is characterized by systematic features including phonological, lexical, grammatical that distinguish it from other varieties of that same language. So when it comes to the dialect, we basically talk about the dialect at three level, or the changes or the differences at three level, including phonological level, lexical level, and grammatical level. So they are also known as phonological, morphological, and syntactic levels. So basically dialect is a part of the language. So we can say in language there are so many dialects, or language is a combination of different dialects. So idiolect are the speech variety of an individual speaker. So idiolect, this is also known as individual dialect. Each speaker or the writer will have his or her own particular voice quality, pitch and stress patterns, favorite lexical items, and even grammatical structure. So idiolect, again we can find out the variation at three different levels, including phonological, morphological, and syntactic level, because dialect deals with at three levels. So idiolect, which is the part of the dialect, so it's a individual way of speaking or the writing. When anyone has an individual way of speaking and the writing, and including the favorite lexical item or even the grammatical structure. So these traits of speech or writing often point to a person's individuality, which leads to a person's style. Terms like Corner's language, Hemingway's language indicate just this type of variety. So even in everyday life, we come across with different kind of people in our community or in our society. So each and every individual speaks or writes in a different way. So that particular trait is called idiolect. So next type of dialect is temporal dialect. So a variety which correlates with the previous periods of the development of language is called temporal dialect. So temporal dialect basically deals with the language which changes over the period of time. So when we study the specific period of language, basically we are dealing with the temporal dialects, because temporal dialect deals with the various periods of development of language. When the language is changes, or when the language is changed, so the temporal dialect is also changed. So language changes over time, and so description of the language at a given point of time is likely to give rise to a historical variety. In the English language, for instance, there are Old English, Middle English, Elizabethan English, and Modern English. Same the case with the Urdu language. The Urdu that was used in the previous period of time, it was used for a specific purpose. For example, the Urdu that was used in the era of Ghalib or the Iqbal, it was entirely the different Urdu that is used in modern age. So that particular dialect that was used in a specific period of time basically is known as temporal dialect. So regional dialect, as you can get an idea with the name region. So when the language varies from region to region, and uh, we can also find some differences or the changes due to the change of region, and these changes again are existed at three level, including phonological level, lexical level, and syntactic level. So far as the English speaking world is concerned, there are British English, American English, Australian English, New Zealand English, South African English, Canadian English, and other international varieties, including Pakistani English, Indian English, and the Singaporean English, Malaysian English, and there are many other varieties. So there are also regional varieties within the Great Britain and the United States, such as Cockney in Britain, North Midland dialect in United States of America. So a variety like this we call regional dialect. So when a specific variety of language is changed due to the change of region, this particular dialect is called regional dialect. So the lay term for it is accent. A dialect is often associated with a particular accent. But there is a difference between dialect and the accent. Dialect deals at three levels, including phonological, morphological, and syntactic level, whereas accent is mainly associated with the pronunciation. Just when the pronunciation is changed, so we cannot say that we are talking about the dialect or the dialect is changed. When the pronunciation is changed, actually the we are talking to a specific accent which is used in specific area. For example, when we talk about the accent, we are mainly concerned with the pronunciation. The word uh, class and class. So they tomato and tomato. So either and the either. So these again there are so many. I mean to say the example. So either and the either. These are two variation of the same word when it comes to the pronunciation. But when we talk about the specific pronunciation, it means that we are dealing with the accent, not the dialect, because the dialect deals with the three levels, including phonological, morphological, and syntactic level, whereas accent is mainly concerned with the pronunciation. So I may say that accent is a part of the dialect which is concerned with the pronunciation. So I have some examples regarding vocabulary. The difference between British and American English as far as morphological level is concerned. So in British English, the people use the word tin, whereas in American English it is used as can. And similarly, telly and the TV, chemist, drugstore, biscuits and cookies, autumn, fall. Lift is used in British English, elevator is used in American English. Again, the difference in terms of the ground floor and the first floor, lorry and the truck, pavement and the sidewalk, petrol and gas. And one last example regarding the vocabulary is underground, which is also known as tube in British English, and in American English, the people use subway. So next type of dialect is the social dialect. This is also called the sociolinguistics, when the variation is occur within the same language due to the change of social class. So this is simply called the social dialect. A variety associated with certain social group is referred to as social dialect. So in all over the world, the class is divided into three levels, into three categories, including lower class, middle class, and the upper class. So all three classes of the society speak the different social dialect. Why they are speaking the different dialect? Because they belong to different social classes. So due to the change of social class, the dialect is also changed. So this particular change in dialect is known as social dialect. So just as oceans and mountains separate people and can lead eventually to distinct language habits, so social and political boundaries separate people and can be instrumental in promoting different speech habits. So every particular community or every particular social class has some specific traits or the characteristics of that particular dialect. Different groups tend to have different groups tend to have their distinctive way of speaking. Hence socio-economic status varieties, ethnic varieties, gender varieties, and age varieties occur. So due to the different distinctive way of speaking, there are many other varieties of language occur, including the ethnic varieties, gender varieties, and the age varieties. So in basically, when we talk about the Punjabi language in Pakistan, again the class is divided into three levels: lower class, middle class, and the upper class. The people who belongs to uh, the specific class, like the lower class, so they may speak a specific dialect of that language. And the people who belong to or who come from the elite family or the elite class, they speak the Punjabi in a different way. A very good example in my mind regarding the social class. So I have observed, or even you may have observed yourself, uh, we have some maids at our home who are working at our homes. So they usually belong to the social class due to their economy. So we can categorize the class due to the economy, and they usually belong to the lower class. So when they speak Punjabi, so they speak in a very different way. Similarly, one more example: the drivers, rickshaw drivers, or the car drivers, even they usually belong to the lower class. So when they are speaking Punjabi, so they speak in a very different way. Their lexical items, their pronunciation, or even the grammatical structure is entirely different as compared to those people who are speaking Punjabi in the middle class or in the upper class. So next type of or the variation, this is also called the gender varieties. In most languages, men and women do not speak identically. Hence, gender varieties occur. So due to the change of gender, we can also find out some variation or the differences within the same language. When it comes to the language variation or the dialect, we only consider just one language. We are not going to compare English with Urdu or Urdu with German or Sraike with Punjabi. We are just considering just one language at the same time. So due to the change of the gender, the language is also changed. So what kind of differences or the variation we can feel? We can feel the difference in terms of pronunciation and vocabulary, as well as the grammar. In English, for example, female speakers tend to use feminine sounding words like lovely, darling, and cute. So these are the words which are frequently used by the female as compared to the male. Women tend to show extra politeness in their speech by leaving a decision open rather than imposing their claims on others. So when it comes to the women, they are quite polite in nature. Same the case with their language. So whenever they are using the language, so they try to convince other by using some polite words. So they show extra politeness in their speech. They make frequent use of expressions like I'm afraid, I'm not sure, I think, but, etc. Or the tag questions like the film is interesting, isn't it? So they frequently use the tag questions in their discussions or in their speech. Whereas as male is concerned, so they try to impose their decisions by using aggressive language or by using harsh words because they are not polite in nature. So that's the difference. So language is same. Either they are using Punjabi or Urdu or even English. So even at our homes, if all the family members are speaking the same language, that is Punjabi. So when the female use Punjabi, so they show extra politeness in their discussion or even in their decision. They do not impose the decisions. But when it comes to the male members, so most of the male members, while speaking in Punjabi, in the same circumstance or in the same environment, they use some aggressive words, harsh words in their language. So that's the difference which is occurred within the same language due to the change of gender, and this particular variety of language is known as gender varieties. Next variety is age variety. So language evolves with age. So a 2 years old child's command of language is far from perfect, while a 5 year old in contrast has a much better command. A 10 years old's command of grammar does not differ significantly from that of adults, through his or her vocabulary is smaller. So again, as we have discussed in the previous slide while talking to the gender varieties, so due to the change of gender, the language is also changed. Same the case with the age varieties. When we change, when there are certain differences in terms of age, the language is also changed. For example, a child who does not have a very good command over grammar or the language, when he or she speaks, he or she speaks in a different way. So he or she may use different pronunciation, vocabulary, or even grammatical structure. But when it comes to the adult, so adult person has fully command over the native language. He may use the appropriate grammatical structure. He or she may use appropriate or relevant vocabulary, or even they may use the appropriate pronunciation as well. So there are language differences chiefly in vocabulary between younger adults and older adults too. Nowadays, some older people still use icebox to refer to what younger generations call fridge. So in United Kingdom or in English speaking country, the older people still use the word icebox instead of refrigerator or the fridge. But the youngster in those countries, in English speaking country, they are using the word fridge instead of iceberg. So due to the change of age, you can observe there are certain variation within the same language at three level, including phonological, morphological, and syntactic level. So younger people tend to pick up newly sprung up slangy expressions all the time. Yes, this is true, and this is not happening in English language only. It happens all the languages of the world. If I talk about Punjabi language or even Urdu language, most of the youngster, while speaking Urdu or Punjabi, they use slangy expressions. The language which is used by a particular group of people, or this is also known as the language of teenagers, or we may also call it is a student language, or language which is mostly used by the students. Yes, I have a very good example in my mind regarding the age varieties in Punjabi language. So Punjabi is used in all over the Punjab here in Pakistan, or even across the Pakistan. The youngster, when they speak Punjabi, so they try to use more sophisticated words in Punjabi, which is very much close to the Urdu language. but the older people, they are still using a pure variety of Punjabi language. They do not include some words from Urdu or the other languages, so they try to speak the pure Punjabi. So this is happening due to the change of age. I have one example in my mind regarding the Punjabi language with respect to age varieties. The older people in some remote areas or far-flung areas, the older people are still using the word ande baldo. So this is a sentence which is produced by the older people only in modern Punjabi or in modern age, because the youngster, they are not well aware the exact meaning of this particular sentence or the phrase the ande baldo. So ande doesn't mean the egg. It's mean that switch on the lights. So in Punjabi, usually when I speak Punjabi at my home, if I want to say कि जी light on कर दो, light off कर दो, बत्ती बाल दो, बत्ती बंद कर दो. Usually we use such kind of sentences. But as I told you earlier, the older people in some remote areas, they are not concerned with the word batti or light. They are still using the word ande baldo. So ande is, which is the shape of bulb. As you can observe, the shape of bulb looks like egg. So that's why they were used to say such kind of expressions since their adulthood or even since their childhood, and still they are using the same language. This is what we call the pure Punjabi. But the youngster or the younger people, they are not well aware the use of such kind of expressions. Okay, next, the socio-economic status variety. Different socio-economic status groups tend to show uh, different patterns of speech characteristics. An often quoted example is the well-known case of ruefulness in New York City. New Yorkers sometimes pronounce r and sometimes drop it. In a word like car, fourth, beer, park, when r follows a vowel either at the end of a word or preceding a consonant, investigation shows that the occurrence of r in the pronunciation of these words is anything but random and anything but meaningless. Actually, there is no impact of meaning whether you are going to pronounce r or not, or if it is remain silent. So in New York City, basically, some of the people, they pronounce r sound at the end of the word or even at the middle of the word, but some of the people, they do not pronounce it. So according to Labov, he confirms that members of higher socio-economic status groups would pronounce ra more frequently than would individuals from lower economic classes. So in United States, those people who are from elite class or the higher class, usually they pronounce the ra sound more frequently in the words as compared to those who come from the middle class or even the lower class. So next variety is ethnic variety. So ethnic groups tend to develop and maintain distinctive speech ways of their own. This is especially true of urban black Americans in the United States, who have actually developed a most widespread and familiar ethnic variety of American English, that is Black English, which its characteristic phonological, morphological and syntactic features as well as some vocabulary of its own. So what is ethnic basically group? Ethnic group represents a specific ethnic community, or when it comes to the language, so they have a very distinctive way of speaking or the writing, which is only used by the ethnic group. For example, in the United States, we have discussed the American English. Mostly black American people, they speak American English which is a distinctive way of speaking or the writing, or they have their own vocabulary. For example, in Black English, which is used by Black American, the first characteristics which is present in Black English is phonology, or phonologically it is different from the other varieties of English. So phonologically, Black English is most silent in its frequent simplification of consonant cluster as des for desk, pass for past, and while for wild. So as you can observe, so they are more simplification as far as the consonant clusters are concerned. Second, the omission of the contracted form in the present tense. For example, that my book. So instead of saying that's my book, they are using less contracted form. They do not use the contraction apostrophe s. So the Black American, in while speaking Black English, they use that my book instead of saying that's my book. Another example, the coffee cold, instead of saying the coffee is cold. So they do not use apostrophe s, or they use less contracted form. Verb be is used to show habitual action, as in, so do they be playing all day? So Black American, while speaking Black English within the United States of America, they use the verb be more frequently. So it becomes the part of their habits. So as we have seen in this example, so instead of saying do they play all day, they would like to say they be playing all day. So use of extra verb be is more frequent in their discussion or in their speech. The fourth one, the use of multiple negative constructions. So they use actually the double negative or the multiple negative in the same sentence, which is absolutely wrong in standard English. So Black American, while speaking in Black English, they use the multiple negative in their sentence. For example, uh, don't nobody never help me do my work. So in this particular sentence, you can observe so many negative constructions are there. For example, the first one is do not, second one is nobody, and third one is never. So you can feel or observe three negative constructions in one sentence. So instead of saying nobody ever helps me do my work, they are frequently use this sentence, do not nobody never help me do my work. So we can see the multiple negative constructions in the Black American English, or which is produced by a particular ethnic group representing the Black American. So next type of variation is diatypic variation, which is not fixed, which is not permanent, and it does not remain constant throughout the situation. So basically it changes according to the change of context or the situation. So while talking to the diatypic variations, I would discuss about variation due to the level of formality. For example, formal speech, consultative speech, colloquial speech, slang, and the next type of variation which occurs due to the change of medium, spoken or the written. And the third type of the atypic variation is variation due to the context, physical context, and social context. So first one is the variation due to the formality. So as you know, the language is categorized into two levels of formality, less formal or the more formal, or we can say the formal or the informal. The first one is a formal speech, a careful, impersonal, and often public mode of speaking used in certain situations and which may influence pronunciation, choice of words, and sentence structure. For example, the following, when said by a speaker at, for example, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to be here tonight. So this particular sentence shows the level of formality, and this particular sentence is used in particular situation. What is that situation? When the situation is quite formal, you are attending a ceremony or conference, or you are attending a meeting, you may use such kind of expressions. Next one is consultative speech. So sometimes used to refer a style of speaking used with other who do not share the speaker's background knowledge or experience, and hence need more background knowledge than a normal used in colloquial speech. So consultative speech is basically used when the speaker is not familiar with the background knowledge or the experience. So next level of the next variation which is occurred due to the level of formality, this is what we call the colloquial speech. So colloquial speech basically is a part of informal language. So, an informal type of speech used among friends and others in situations where empathy, rapport of, or lack of social barriers are important. So, colloquial speech is often marked by the use of slang or idioms and by other linguistic characteristics such as deletion of subject or auxiliaries. For example, as in got the time instead of do you have the time. So colloquial speech is not necessarily non-prestige speech and should not be considered as substandard. Educated native speakers of a language normally use colloquial speech in informal situations with friends, fellow workers, and members of the family. So even in everyday life, when we are speaking Urdu or Punjabi with our parents, relative, and other members of family, so most of the time we use the colloquial speech. Though it's a type of informal speech, but it is very close to the formal one, because while speaking the colloquial speech, we do not use the vulgar language, we do not use the taboo words, or even we do not use the slang expressions. So that's why it's a part of for informal speech, but it seems to be less informal. And one of the major characteristics of colloquial speech is we do not use the subject, as there I have already discussed an example with you, got the time. So instead of saying do you have the time, you may use got the time. So subject is less important here. So next level of variation due to the formality is slang. So slang is a very informal speech as compared to the colloquial, which is also the part of informal speech or informal language. So casual, very informal speech using expressive but informal words and expression, including slang words or the expression. For some people, slang is equivalent to colloquial speech, but for others it means undesirable speech. Usually, colloquial speech refers to a speech variety used in informal situations with colleagues, friends, or the relatives and other family members. But slang is used for very informal speech variety, which often serves as an in-group or within a group language for a particular set of people, such as teenager, army recruits, uh, pop groups, etc. Most slang is rather unstable, as its words and expression can change quite rapidly. For example, beat it, scram, rake off, and there are many other expressions. But if we talk about Urdu or Punjabi language, the language that is used by a particular group of people. For example, while speaking in Urdu with friends or within a particular group of people, usually the student may use the word दफा हो जाओ, तुम बहुत बदतमीज हो. The word दफा हो जाओ, बदतमीज, these are the example of slang because it is used by a particular group of people or within the group. You cannot use such kind of expressions in front of your teacher or in front of your parents even, or and the other relatives. So that's why this is a very informal variety of language. So this is a spectrum of from formality to informality, slang, informal, in between, then formal, and then stuffy. So next level of variation which is existed due to the change of medium. So we have two major medium of language: either we communicate our message through writing or through speech. So difference in in medium entails difference in ways and patterns of expression, and hence variation within the same language. So due to the change of medium, the language is also changed, or there are certain variation within the same language. So when we speak, we give emphasis on pronunciation. We are less concerned with the grammatical structure, or we use contractions more frequently. But when it comes to the writing, we use a different variety, or there are certain variation within the same language. For example, we are mainly concerned with the grammatical structure. We focus on appropriate use of vocabulary, and we are concerned with the actual use of spellings as well. So that's the difference due to the change of medium. In speech, we our focus is on pronunciation, intonation, and stress pattern. And while writing something, we are mainly concerned with grammatical structure and spellings. So speech versus writing, difference in hearer reader involvement. In speech, the listener is more important, and in writing, the reader is exactly involved. Again, differences in linguistics explicitness. So in speech, the participants rely heavily on their common background knowledge and the immediate context. So while speaking something, you must be familiar with the background information. Otherwise, you are not going to communicate your message, or you won't be able to understand the message. So you should be familiar with the immediate context. But in writing, you are not concerned with the background information or the immediate context. Here is an example. What is the time by your watch? The answer is milkman has come. So what's happening in our society? So milkman has come is associated with a specific time. Even in our community, while speaking Punjabi or Urdu, we have associated the time with the specific things. For example, in the past, अगर आपसे कोई पूछता था कि टाइम क्या हुआ है, तो you suddenly reply कि जी खबरें लग गई हैं. तो it's mean that that particular news is associated with the time. It was confirmed in the past. The bulletin was at 9 o'clock, 9 बजे खबरें लगती थी, तो वो it was associated with. So same the case with the speech, in speech. But in writing, you won't be able to understand the meaning because you are not familiar with the immediate context. It is about a difference in preparedness. So when it comes to the writing, we are very much aware regarding the preparation, because in speech we do not prepare, we just spontaneously speaking. But when it comes to the writing, firstly we would have to jot down the ideas. We would have to make a sequence between one sentence to another, and we would have to follow the sequence of cohesion and the coherence while writing something, and we are extra conscious while preparing something when it comes to the writing. But when it comes to speech, we spontaneously speaking, we do not prepare anything in mind before speaking something. We The idea comes in our mind and we just speak out. And next one is stylistic difference, the difference in terms of grammar. In speech, we are less concerned with the grammatical structure because we are concerned with the message more importantly. But in writing, we are mainly concerned with the use of grammar and the spellings as well. So in written language, sentences are usually complete and tend to be longer than the average spoken sentence. So in speech, we use simple sentences or the short sentences, whereas while writing anything, we try to use larger sentences or compound sentences by adding some clauses. So next one is difference in terms of vocabulary. In speech, we are not concerned with the appropriate use of vocabulary. We try to communicate our message in simple words. We do not use what we call the professional terms or the technical words while speaking anything. But while writing, we are mainly concerned with appropriate use of vocabulary and the grammatical structure. Another difference in terms of phonology, which is concerned with the speech. In speech, more information can be communicated or conveyed by stress and intonation beside the literal meaning of an utterance. The more we put stress or the intonation, uh, the better it will be communicated. So due to the change of stress or the intonation pattern, the meanings are also changed in a language. Difference in terms of graphology. So through graphs, because graphs are actually used in writing only. So if we are using a specific punctuation or capitalization, italics, and paraphrasing, so we basically communicate the meaning in another way. So the last topic regarding the atypic variation, the variation due to the change of context. So there are two basically context, physical context and the social context. So physical context, when we change the place physically, for example, if I'm teaching at classroom, so my language will be different. The my pronunciation, even the vocabulary or the grammatical structure would entirely be different. But as I change my social physical context, I go to go to the playground or even restaurant, so my language will be different with my students. So in while talking to about the specific topic in the classroom, I will be more formal. But when I go to the classroom or the restaurant with my student, or while playing cricket or any game, I may use very informal language that will be different from the classroom. So due to the change of social physical context, the language may differ. So another type of the context is social context. So social context is related to the topics. For example, if I'm talking about uh, right now the sociolinguistics or the language variation or the dialect, so suddenly I change my topic. I talk about politics or I talk about the sports even. so my language or the variation within the same language would occur. So change in topics from taboo to politics. So one topic to another topic, the language would be changed. Actually, the language would remain same, one language, but there are certain variation. For example, Punjabi, Urdu, or even English. So if I am teaching English in the classroom, so I may use the different vocabulary. But when it comes to the restaurant or playground or the sports, so while speaking in English, I may use a different language. Similarly, while speaking English, if I'm teaching one particular topic and suddenly I change my topic, so this is what we call the social context. So due to the change of social context, the variation uh, occurs within the same language. So this is all about the today's lecture on the dialect. Uh, we have discussed two major types of variation, dialectal variation and diatypic variations. So thank you very much.